Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, January 20th, 2022, and just a year ago, President Joe Biden was inaugurated as the 46th President of the United States of America, and just a year later, we are talking about the 2022 Senate elections that are going to be extremely crucial to the Democratic Party's continued majority that they currently have by a margin of just one in the advantage, with Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie with an ultimate 50-50 delegation right now in the United States Senate. And the topic of today's video deals primarily with the United States Senate election in the state of New Hampshire. And what do we know about it so far? Maggie Hassan is the incumbent, and we're going to actually zoom in here so we can look at it in a little bit higher quality simply because the screen recorder I am using right now is not the one that I am typically using. I normally use the one that is built into my computer. And I no longer have my computer right now. It's being fixed by Apple. They notified me today, actually, that they actually, I repeated actually more than once, doesn't sound real. They received my computer and they are working on it now. So that's a good sign. I think we are going to be getting back to the standard amount of uploads. I'm heading back to college on Sunday. I will be in Boston around the evening time frame, and I start classes on Monday. So it's getting right into the full stretch of the second semester, but I'm really excited about what's coming up with these midterm elections. And in the state of New Hampshire, what I have been trying to get at here is that there is an incumbent here, Maggie Hassan, who won her first election back in 2016. Now, who is Maggie Hassan? Well, she actually has a pretty good electorate backing in terms of statewide elections. She came into 2016 challenging Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte, who was first elected in 2010. Now, Ayotte actually won in 2010 with over 60% of the vote. It was a 60-37 margin. So Kelly Ayotte was all the way up here, and the Democrats were down here. It was not even close, a 20-point plus margin. And here she comes into 2016. You have Maggie Hassan, who was opposing Kelly Ayotte at the time, I believe, as the incumbent governor at that point of position. So she was challenging her as someone who was an elected statewide official. And she used that in order to defeat Kelly Ayotte, but get this, a margin of 0.1%. It was once the narrowest Senate election that we had seen in quite some time, a difference of 1,000 votes out of over 700,000 cast. I mean, it was absolutely such an insanely close election, and now she's up for re-election. So knowing all of that, knowing how she had a close election in the past, one might say, you know, she has no chance at re-election in 2022. But things actually did not end up as beneficial for the GOP as you might expect. And you can see this in these new St. Anselm College polls. Now, they are rated A, B rated pollsters. They don't poll races outside of the state of New Hampshire. They stay strictly within this region. I think maybe once or twice they have expanded out into another New England state, but they really don't leave New Hampshire. And they provided us with pretty consistent polling from the state for quite some time now. If we actually go ahead and narrow up to the state of New Hampshire on this list here, what we will find is that New Hampshire is routinely polled by them. And you will find that a lot of these polls show sometimes Maggie Hassan behind. And more recently in October, what they found was that Chris Sununu, the incumbent governor, defeats Maggie Hassan by a margin of 5 percentage points. What they had found in the past was that Chris Sununu won by a margin of 8 percentage points. Again, they also found that she would lose by 6 percentage points. And the interesting thing about this was that St. Anselm College was doing these polls back in March 2021 when Biden was soaring high in terms of popularity. I mean, March 10th, 2021, let's see if we can find it here, what the exact approval rating was. On March 10th, Joe Biden was up double digits across the nation and was up by a margin of 14 percentage points nationwide. And yet, what we found was that Maggie Hassan was still losing. Fast forward to August, Biden becomes more unpopular. August 31st, let's see if we can find the date here. If I'm looking away from your screen in your direction, it's because I'm looking at the monitor here. Joe Biden's disapproved of by 0.6%, so it made sense that she was starting to fall off. Then it continued. In October, Biden was down, Maggie Hassan was down, but only against one person, only against Chris Sununu. And guess what happens? In a stunning, unfateful turn of events for the GOP, Chris Sununu announces that he will not seek the United States Senate position in 2022 and instead will turn to re-election for the governor's mansion, which means that he was completely withdrawing himself from the race as the only person who was defeating Maggie Hassan in the polls. So now they come out with a slew of new polls detailing her against potential GOP candidates, Smith, Morse, and Baldock, who are the Baldock is the front runner in the state of New Hampshire. The rest are lower tier individuals when it comes down to name recognition and candidacy. And what you will find is that she defeats them from a range of a low point of 7% and a high point of 18%. And if this is not a testament to Maggie Hassan's resiliency to keep her above water, to keep Democrats above water in New Hampshire, I don't know what is. Because it isn't just these polls. The Trafalgar Group also did a polling, two-way sweep in December of 2021. Now, the Trafalgar Group is a polling station that is reputable in some extent and not so reputable in other extents. But one thing that they do seem to get sometimes are these Senate elections. And looking at their more recent track record in polling, they actually end up being pretty accurate. They have an A- rating pollster from the polling rating from FiveThirtyEight. And while I disagree a lot with what they actually put out when it comes down to partisanship and clearly favoring certain candidates, in some cases, they end up being correct. They're not always correct. In the state of Texas, they were off by 7 percentage points in 2018. In some of these races in 2020, they were wrong. They said Trump would win Arizona by 5. But in the 2021 races, they said Democrats would win New Jersey by 4, and that Youngkin would win Virginia by 2. And that's exactly what happened. Coincidentally, or maybe they were accurate, as sometimes they are. And even as a right-leaning pollster that almost consistently puts the GOP ahead in polls, they find that Maggie Hassan wins her races. I mean, not a single poll where Chris Sununu is not the GOP candidate does Maggie Hassan lose to these Republicans. And this is something that we honestly might not have originally expected to happen, considering that Joe Biden has fallen out of public favor. And I mean this quite literally. As of today, Biden's disapproval rating is 53.4%. I'm going to take my phone real quick and figure out what that exact margin here. 53.4% minus 41.9. If you're wondering what goes on behind the screens when I don't have my face cam on, this is exactly what's happening here. I'm going to make sure that my credit card isn't on the back of my phone so you can't see that there. But it is an 11.5% difference between the disapprove and the approve. And nonetheless, Maggie Hassan is up high in the state of New Hampshire. And seeing this, I am extremely impressed by her ability to stay above ground despite what seems to be the rest of the Senate seats turning tides away from the Democratic Party. And I mean this quite literally. Taking a look at the Senate election projection that I had just 1 year ago, right after Biden was inaugurated, what do you find? You find that the state of New Hampshire was lean D. Where is it today? It's also lean D. It hasn't changed characterization much, except for the brief period of time where it looks like the momentum was on the GOP's side in order for New Hampshire to go red with Chris Sununu. Meaning in the month of September, I had it Republican plus 0.1, a tilt characterization. Then came the month of October, Republican plus 1. After the Virginia election there, the entire Senate map shifted towards the right. And New Hampshire, not only was it lean D just 3 months prior, but shifted all the way, not to tilt, not to lean, but to likely Republican, counting on the fact that Chris Sununu would take this energy, take this enthusiasm that the GOP has mustered up in the Virginia and New Jersey races, and all of a sudden transform his candidacy from governor to Senate. But instead, he remains on his steady pathway. And that's where it fell apart for the GOP. Because in the next month's rating, in December of 2021, New Hampshire shifts over 2 characterizations, not to lean, but to tilt Republican given the national environment, and under a further analysis, moves back into the lean Democratic column. But it's very different than a bunch of its center counterparts. Because what you find in states such as Pennsylvania, what was Democratic leaning before is now Republican leaning. What you find in Arizona is Democratic leaning before, now Republican leaning. Same case in Nevada, same case in Georgia. So what you see is that despite many other states, in fact, every single other state shifting further and further towards the right as the months progress, in the 1 year span and the difference between January 2021 and January 2022, you find that Maggie Hassan's seat simply does not move. Because Chris Sununu decides not to run, because also, and I'm going to go ahead and check the validity of this in just a moment by going back into the previous elections and then just doing a little bit of working there with Wikipedia, what you will find is that the state of New Hampshire in 2022 does not expect Kelly Ayotte to make a second turn. Because amongst those who have declined to run, Kelly Ayotte is also in that midst. So they have lost Scott Brown, who ran for Senate in 2014 and nearly won despite being a carpetbagger by every stretch of the definition. In addition to that, they lost Chris Sununu, the extremely popular governor who was winning by, 30 points in 2020, despite Trump losing the state by 7%. He decides not to run. And Kelly Ayotte, someone who came within so close of winning in 2016, couldn't do it, but came extremely close, which means that in an environment less beneficial for Democrats than the 2016 Senate elections, where Democrats, actually did pretty well, arguably gained 2 Senate seats there, Illinois and New Hampshire. that she still couldn't turn that into a victory and will not run. I mean, she's out of the midst, which means that Republicans have nowhere else to look. I mean, who did they have, right? They have the former acting governor of New Hampshire, who was just in a brief period of time, Chuck Morse. You have Donald Baldock, who was the former U.S. Special Forces Brigadier General in the United States Army and a candidate for Senate in 2020, was not the nominee for Senate in 2020. What you will find is that you have Kevin Smith, another person being polled, a former candidate for New Hampshire governor in 2012, the town manager of Londonderry. So these are candidates who may have small titles, a Wikipedia page to their name, but nothing more than that in terms of New Hampshire politics. Chuck Morse is probably the only one who really knows what he's doing electorally as the president of the New Hampshire Senate, with the GOP reclaiming their majorities in the New Hampshire Senate. But beyond that, I mean, he doesn't really have much to testament in terms of a statewide elected position, and I don't think the GOP is going to be thoroughly impressed by him. In addition to that, what you will find is that in terms of the endorsements that we have seen, you have all of the endorsements behind one person, Donald Baldock. And yet, he isn't even performing that well. The Cook Political Report rates it as lean D. Inside Elections has it as tilt D. Sabatos Crystal Ball has it at lean D. And Real Clear Politics, a source that typically, is safe, so I think this makes sense, keeps it as a toss-up. And in the polling data, again, remind yourself that not one poll shows Maggie Hassan defeating any other type of GOP nominee besides Chris Sununu, and he's still not going to run. You can see that the polls actually, Maggie Hassan still defeats Kelly Ayotte. She defeats Corey Lewandowski. She defeats Corky Messner, someone who's potentially thinking about running. The only person that actually is very interesting about this, the only candidate that she loses to, of course, is Chris Sununu, but the other person, or I guess the other candidate per se in a potential matchup, is a generic Republican versus a generic Democrat. And of course, the generic Democrat is all but saying Maggie Hassan because she is the incumbent, and for the generic Republican there, who knows who that could be. But it is very clear that the voters here are not turning to the GOP as a response to President Biden, even in one of what is expected to be one of the most competitive Senate elections in 2022. I mean, the numbers don't lie. The averages are telling us that Maggie Hassan has a significant advantage over all of these Republicans, despite the nation turning on the Democrats. What started out what was a 4-point lead for the Democratic Party has turned into a 3-point lead for the GOP, a 7-point swing in what was over a 20-point swing on the national environment when it comes down to Joe Biden and his net approval. Just 42% of the nation is currently happy with where Joe Biden is right now, and he's actually getting super, super close to where Donald Trump was just exactly 4 years ago today. Donald Trump 4 years ago today was at a 39.1% approval rating. Joe Biden is at 41.9%. Not that big of a difference. Biden and Trump are practically neck and neck when it comes down to where they were just, comparing their points in the presidency. And yet, Maggie Hassan still holds on. Even FiveThirtyEight, shows Biden down, but Real Clear Politics does it even more, minus 11.3% nationwide. Nothing of this tells me that Biden is on track to do well in 2024, but that's so far out. And this also tells me that Democrats aren't on track to do well. What we see in the generic congressional vote is that Democrats simply aren't performing as well as they used to. But regardless, Maggie Hassan is. And that's why that's so substantial. That's why one of these Senate races, a race where the Democratic Party is in a position where the Senate race needs to be, let's go ahead and make sure that we have the LT projection race up here. What we find is that the Senate election in the state of New Hampshire, was always meant to be competitive, always meant to be a race that the Democrats were going to have to defend pretty vehemently. I mean, they were going to have to spend so much money on the race, but they might not have to at the end of the day. I mean, seeing how many of these races are really going to go by a pretty safe margin for either political party, what I find is that Democrats are really going to be focusing on a few key races, and I'll characterize those in just a moment. We know how so many of these states are going to go. They really aren't worth spending super large amounts of time discussing. But if you start to peel away from the very, very brief list of toss-up and swing races for 2022, that benefits whichever party gets to peel away from. I mean, to be fair, Florida and Ohio probably aren't going to go away from the GOP, regardless of what happens on the Democratic side and potentially on the Republican side. Democrats probably are going to win the state of Colorado, if we're being completely honest. Republicans will probably win the state of North Carolina. But that leaves 6 competitive races where the Democratic Party has the possibility, in a perfect world, of expanding their majority through Wisconsin, expanding their majority through Pennsylvania, expanding their majority by holding on to Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, potentially, and holding on to the state of New Hampshire. But that's not a done deal. With all of these races deemed as key and substantial and swing races, you see how equally important they all are. Democrats at 50-50 means one would completely shift the entire Senate in the other direction. New committee assignments, new leaders, a new majority leader, right? A new majority whip. You have, or I guess not necessarily an official position, but unless I'm completely wrong about that. What we find is that looking at the key races here, they matter so much. And if Democrats can just peel one away, that leaves one other race to have more funding, to have more resources, to have more allocated from the Democratic National Committee. And that would benefit them substantially. Because with such few races being focused on, every single bit will matter. And if you can withdraw a race, meaning you can treat New Hampshire as Republicans will treat North Carolina, Ohio, and Florida, you're in a good position. It gives Democrats that upper hand that they otherwise would not have, especially considering so many of these retirements, and it would really benefit them to have an additional Senate seat removed from the competitive column, because then it would allow them to focus more on other races that are definitely going to need every single bit of attention that they can get, that might otherwise be taken away from the focus simply because New Hampshire is thrown back into the midst. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the video on your screen and the playlist. My Instagram and Twitter are linked there as well. One thing that I do want to hear from you guys, again, is your verdict on the face cam. This is my second time actually making a face cam video besides my face reveal and a couple of my live streams. But beyond that, I really don't use it that much. But if you like it, I will go ahead and stick with it for as many videos as I can. I probably won't be able to use it for every single one, but it's entirely up to you guys, because this is the content that you guys are watching. So let me know in the comment section down below. And again, thank you guys so much for watching this video.